Yes. So now we have talked about all the different forms of agency except one. As I mentioned before we went to break, this one should feel like a breath of fresh air if you've got a good understanding of the other ones. If you find yourself, and I really do, kind of want you to apply this to yourself. If you find yourself later on when you're answering questions going, you know what, I missed a question about designated agency. It's probably not that you have a problem with designated agency. It's probably that you have a problem with the other ones and you didn't understand those.
And once we go over this today, I think everybody's probably going to be like, okay, well, why didn't we just go straight into this one? There's a big reason we didn't go straight into this one, because you've got to understand the shit part of dual agency before you can be like, OMG, this is why designated exists.
That's exactly right. Designated dual agency was created to address the problems that come from dual agency. See, here's the thing you need to understand. It's always been understood by the Real Estate Commission that dual agency was a bad deal for the clients. But it just didn't happen that often because offices were small. If you're a small office, like our office, with only 4 people in the office, we might not have more than 4 or 5 listings at any given time, seller clients. We might not have more than 4 or 5 buyer clients at any given time. What are the odds, if you have a small office with a small number of clients at any given time, that one of your buyer clients wants to look at one of your listings? What are the odds? Pretty small, right?
About the odds of winning the lottery.
Right. But as time has gone on, folks, offices have gotten much larger. I want you to think about, some of you now, when you think about a real estate office, are you thinking about an office like ours with 4 people in it, or are you thinking about a Keller Williams office with a couple hundred people in it? Are you thinking about a RE/MAX office with 50 folks in it? Are you thinking about EXP with 2,000 that have an online office?
You're probably thinking about a major big firm.
You're thinking about big offices because that's where the industry has migrated to. What becomes more and more of a problem as offices become larger and larger? What happens more and more commonly simply because offices have gotten so big?
Dual agency.
Dual agency.
Agency. More dual agency. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yeah.
You see why it's so necessary to have an understanding of the things we've already done before we get to this one? Because you have to understand why this one was created. This one was created to address a big issue that offices were getting so big that dual agency was happening all the time. Are you with me?
Yes.
Right? Now, designated dual agency is still dual agency.
Right. That's a big yes.
It is
Please
a
don't
type
overlook
of,
that.
It is a type of dual agency. Here's why. What is the definition of dual agency, folks? What do we say the definition of dual agency was?
One office.
One firm.
One
representing
firm.
One office. It might be a firm. It might be a sole proprietorship, but one office that's been hired by what?
Two clients.
Two
Two
clients.
parties in the same transaction.
Transaction.
Both sides.
And that's still true in designated dual agency. How many offices are we going to be dealing with here, folks?
One.
One. How many clients is that office going to have?
Two.
In the same transaction.
How many individual brokers are we going to be dealing with? Does that even matter?
No.
It doesn't matter.
Good job. Good job.
Because definitionally, it's still dual agency. Is everybody good with that?
Good job.
Here's the thing, though. One of the big problems with dual agency has always been, well, if I'm in this big office and there are 200 of us in this office and I'm working with a buyer client. Now, I know they hired my whole office, but the reality is I'm the one who's been taking them on showings. I'm the one who's been giving them advice. Is that a reasonable statement for a broker in today's world to make about the buyer client that they're working with?
Yes.
Even though that buyer hired the whole office, both the broker and the buyer feel like it's a one-to-one relationship. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
Right. Even though they did hire on paper the one office, they're going to think, oh, well, Seth's my agent or
There you
Zeta
go.
is my agent. Like,
that's just the human nature of the thing. And think about that from the opposite perspective. Doesn't the seller largely feel the same way? Doesn't the seller largely feel like, okay, I know I hired this whole office, but Travis is my listing agent. Travis is the one who's giving me advice. Travis is the one who's handling my listing. Isn't that a logical thing for the seller to feel?
yes.
Right? Here's the problem with dual agency. Even if Seth and Travis have never met each other, as soon as we fall into dual agency, Seth's got to stop giving advice to that buyer, and Travis has got to stop giving advice to that seller, because technically Seth represents the buyer and the seller, and Travis represents the buyer and the seller because they both work for the office, and the office represents the buyer and the seller. Does everybody see that?
Right. Is anybody confused on that?
Here's the thing. That is frustrating for everybody. To Seth's question, is anybody confused by that? I bet your buyer's going to be confused by that. When you tell the buyer, when Seth tells the buyer, I can't give you any advice because my office represents the seller, the
So
buyer,
technically, I represent the seller.
the buyer's going to say, Alexia, we're going to mute you because
Sorry, I got it.
the buyer is going to say naturally, well, wait a minute. So does that mean you know the seller? And Seth's going to have to say, no, I don't really know the seller. It's just that somebody else in my office is representing the seller. Isn't the buyer going to feel like that's kind of sketchy that now you can't give them advice because somebody else in your office is dealing with it? Isn't the buyer going to be a little bit like, really?
They're going to look like, what the?
Yeah.
You don't even know them?
And by the way, the seller's going to feel the same way when Travis says to the seller, you know what, I can't give you any advice because somebody else in my office, and I've never even met the guy, but somebody else in my office has this buyer client that's interested in your listing. Isn't the seller going to be like, well, what's that got to do with you and why you can't give me advice? Isn't that a natural question?
Yes.
Exactly. They're going to be like, so what's that got to do with you? Like,
Right. And that is the big problem of dual agency. Talk to me before we go any further, because this is what Seth just asked, and it's a great question. Is anybody confused about that in dual agency, or are we understanding why that's going to come up, why it's going to be a problem, why the buyer and seller are likely to say, this is some bull?
right.
Everybody
So
okay
because
with that?
Travis has a listing, I'm working with the buyer client. When we go over to that property, I have to tell my buyer, hey, somebody else in my firm represents this seller. So technically, since I work at that same firm, I represent that seller.
And
That's
so
what we're talking about.
therefore, I can't give you advice, even though I've never actually met
Never
the
even
seller,
met
don't
him.
know anything about the seller, and I really wish I could give you advice, but I can't because we're in dual agency. That's just frustrating for everybody.
Yes.
So here's what the Real Estate Commission created. Something called designated dual agency, where we could basically create an office within the office, or better said, create two offices within the office. Designated dual agency allows the office to say, you know what? Within our group, we're going to create a group of people that is going to represent the best interest of the buyer in this one transaction.
Right. Don't
There are
forget,
no-
we're still in dual agency.
Right. This group that we designate to the buyer is not going to have anything to do with the seller for the rest of this transaction. Everybody okay with that statement? And then we're going to designate a group to represent the seller. And that group's not going to have anything to do with the buyer. We're basically creating teams within.
Was that your
our
drawing,
own
Travis?
office. No, I was clearing that out. I'm not
Okay.
sure. We're creating teams within the office. We're creating a buyer's team, and we're creating a seller's team. Now you
You
might
don't
ask,
care? I'm going to throw up a whiteboard just to draw that while you're saying it.
right? So here's the question you might ask: how does that help the buyer? How does that help the seller? How does it help the buyer to create a buyer's team? How does it help the seller to create a seller's team? Here's why.
Now you can.
Because now, if you're on the buyer's team, what are we going to free you up to give that you couldn't give when we were just in regular old-fashioned
Advice.
advice? Now, if you've been put in the buyer's team in that transaction, and that could be a team of 1, but could it also be a team of 2 or 3 or 10 of the agents, of the brokers within the office?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. We're going to create a team of brokers within the office and say, this is the buyer's team. Anybody on the buyer's team can give the buyer what in this transaction?
Advice.
Advice. And here's the seller's team. And anybody on the seller's team can give the seller what in this transaction? Advice. And the only thing that's going to be different about this transaction is that the people in the office have to be very conscious of which team they are on. And you have to treat the other people in your office as if they work somewhere else for this one transaction. For this one transaction, you're going to be on opposite teams from somebody in your office. So I love sports analogies. Let me tell you how I think of this. I'm a UNC grad. I played football at Carolina. My spouse is a Michigan grad and a huge University of Michigan fan. Now, that's not normally a conflict. We very rarely have a conflict in our house. When Carolina's playing, we're both Carolina fans. When Michigan's playing, we're both Michigan fans. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
Dual agency would not make sense when Michigan and Carolina played each other. Because as much as I would love to say I'm not going to root against Michigan for Drew's sake, if we're playing them, I hope we beat the shit out of them. And as much as I would love to think he's not going to root against Carolina, if we're playing Michigan, he wants us to lose. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
Yes.
And by the way, if I don't want to talk to him for a couple of days, all I got to do is walk around our house and go, time out. He's still, for those of you that are sports fans, 1993 National Championship game still burns him alive. Still, after all these years. Chris Webber calling a timeout he did not have. So here's the thing. When Michigan and Carolina play each other in something, we go into designated dual agency. What we do is split the household. For that one game, we act like we ain't married to each other. Does that make sense for everybody?
They're still sports fans.
That's
at
right.
Large.
That's right. But for that
That's
one
the dual
game,
agency.
for that one game, he's only a Michigan fan.
Sports fan.
And I lose my allegiance to Michigan for that one game. For that one game, I'm only a Carolina fan, and he loses his allegiance to Carolina because it is more natural for us to be in designated dual agency for that game. Does that make sense for everybody now?
Yes.
Yeah, surprisingly, because I would not have gotten that if you didn't explain it. So just Travis, to give you an idea of where I'm going with this, I think you already know, is that sometimes people get confused and think the entire firm is in designated dual agency. Entire firm is just in true dual agency still.
That's
The
it.
people who are in the designated boxes are the only designated agents in that firm.
And to build on that analogy of how the entire firm is still representing both, Bosco has a UNC collar and a Michigan collar. He don't change teams based on when Michigan and Carolina play each other. He still likes both. He don't care. He don't care because he's not one of the designated agents. But I care, and Drew cares because we're gonna go on our separate ways for that game. Does that make sense? Now, when that game's over and Michigan and Carolina are not playing each other, we all go back to the same what?
Same team.
Same team. I'm a
And if
Michigan
I may-
fan. He's a Carolina fan, as long as they're not playing each other. And so designated dual agency allows the office, and I'm going to go to the next slide here, Seth.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify one thing really fast. The DA stands for dual agency. DDA stands for designated dual agent.
Yep, and we're going to see this variations of that in several of these slides here. So what designated dual agency allows us to do is give the best of both worlds. Because now the firm, the office, can represent both and give both of them the thing they expected in the first place, which is what?
Advice.
Our advice, our loyalty, right? Because here's the truth. If Seth has been working with that buyer, was the buyer really relying on advice from everybody in the office, or were they relying on advice from Seth?
No, just
From
Seth.
Seth.
From Seth.
Yes.
And from their position, that's not going to change. Does everybody recognize that from the buyer's position, this is going to be completely seamless?
Yes.
Because who would they have gone to for advice before we got to designated dual agency? If we were an exclusive agency, who would that buyer have gone to for advice?
Just their one agent. So Seth, I
They would
guess.
have gone to Seth. Technically, they could have gone to anybody in the office, but we all know that's not how it really works. They would have naturally picked up the phone and called who?
Seth.
Seth, because that's the one they've been working with. Everybody understand that,
Yes.
right? If that seller has been working with Travis, they could have called anybody in the office. But did they do that, or did they pick up the phone and call Travis when they had a question?
Right.
They called Travis, and they expected advice from Travis. Can Seth give that buyer advice in designated dual agency? If we designate him as a designated buyer's agent, can he continue to operate exactly as he would have before we even went into dual agency?
Yes, he can.
Yes.
If we designate Travis to represent the seller, can Travis operate exactly as he would have when we were in exclusive agency?
Yes.
Yes.
So are
And just touching
go for it.
based on that, because I think it also really helps whenever we apply ourselves to situations. So let's just say like all of us here, all 98 of us are in the same firm. Okay, everybody who is not designated as like, so Seth is designated to the buyer, Travis is designated to the seller. Everybody else that's in this Zoom call is just a dual agent. Nobody's designated unless you've been
Because the
explicitly.
because the rest of the firm still represents both the buyer and the seller. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
So
y'all can't know nothing.
So if the seller called Shane, who's part of our firm, and said, "What should I do?" Shane would say, "I can't answer that question for you
Right.
because I'm a dual agent."
Right.
But Seth can answer that question for you because he's your designated agent. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So the rest of the firm is going to stay neutral, but the ones who've been put on the teams are going to work only for their team. That is designated dual agency. And the benefit to that, hopefully, is becoming obvious. The clients get what they wanted,
Which was advice.
which was advice. Janet, you had your hand up.
You know how like a few sentences ago you said that they could act the same way as if if they could they totally act the same way and that they can't go over the water cooler and share stuff.
There you go. So we need to talk about, that's a great catch, Janet. So what does Seth and Travis have to do differently? Or let's use the visual we've got here. Let's say that the buyer has been designated a team of Seth and Travis. That's the blue circle. Okay? That's the buyer's team. Now, the purple box is the firm. Does everybody recognize that the buyer and the seller have hired the same firm?
Yeah.
Yes.
The purple box makes it dual agency, does it not?
Yes.
Yes.
So, if we had just stayed with the purple box and didn't have the circles, we would be in true dual agency, and nobody in the purple box could give either of these parties what?
Advice.
Advice.
But we went one step further and we said, okay, let's don't do true dual agency. Let's don't do plain old-fashioned dual agency. Let's spice it up a little bit. Let's do designated dual agency.
Let's take a step further.
Right. So we're going to designate a team for the buyer, and that's the blue circle. Does everybody notice that?
Yes.
Now, I've intentionally done this because it's going to show you that pretty much everything's possible here. Is the buyer's team the same size as the seller's team? Is that
It is not.
It is not.
No.
That's not required. Could it be the same size?
Yeah.
Yes.
Does it have to be the same size?
No.
No.
No, it doesn't. The only thing that's true here is there can't be any overlap. You can't have anybody in the office that's in what?
In both.
In both circles. Can there be people in the office that aren't in either circle?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Look at Mama D sitting over there. She's not in anybody's circle. So what kind of agent is she in the transaction?
A
Dual.
agent.
Dual agent. Right? So she still represents both of them, but she can't give either of them advice. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
Here's the thing. Seth and Travis are no longer dual agents. They are designated dual agents, which means they only work for this transaction now for one of the clients, which is which one?
The buyer.
The buyer.
So who is the and I think there's going to be two answers here. One is breathing, one is not. Who is the dual agent in this situation?
Oh, I love that question. Who's the dual agent here in this whole thing? Who's the buyer and the seller hire that's the dual agent?
The firm.
Crav Talks LLC, the office, the firm, right?
And then Mama D would be just a dual agent in the firm.
And she would be a dual sub-agent if you want to do it that way, right? She's
very good.
Now, who are the designated dual agents working on behalf of the buyer?
Travis and Seth.
Travis and Seth. Who is the designated dual agent working on behalf of the seller? That's Leslie.
Leslie.
This is huge.
Now,
good job.
To Janet's question, from the buyer and seller's perspective, nothing's going to change. But internally, does something have to change?
Yes.
Internally, folks. And this is where we have to really, really be good at what we do to do this. Don't we have to put up a wall internally between the designated buyer's agents and the designated seller's agents? Don't we need a wall there?
Yes.
Absolutely.
And look, we're just putting more layers and layers and layers on top of this.
And the reason they need a wall there is they don't work for both. We can no longer, in dual agency, back it up and pretend those circles aren't there. In dual agency, could Seth share the deepest, darkest secrets of that buyer with Leslie? In dual agency?
Yes, he can.
Yes.
Dual, yes.
Because in dual agency, they're all on the same team. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
The only thing nobody could do is share that information outside the box. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
Now they can't share that information outside of their circle. So Seth can't tell Leslie everything. Seth can't even tell Dee everything. Seth now has to keep that internal to his bubble. In other words, you start to act like these people outside of your bubble work for an entirely different office for that one transaction.
Yes.
Okay?
And so the reason this is really important, we're adding more and more layers to a dual agency situation. You can't forget that we started with dual agency, and Travis, I don't know if you were going to get to this at a certain point, but we also like to think of it like a hallway. There's two doors. First, the firm has to enter dual agency. Then they have to go through the second door to enter designated dual agency. But the catch there is that some of that firm is going to stay back there in that first hallway. There's only a select few agents who are going to walk through.
That's exactly right. Think of it this way. When the clients, the buyer and the seller, give permission for dual agency, doesn't the whole firm go through that door?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? The buyer, the seller, and every broker in the firm goes through the dual agency, the door labeled dual agency. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
And then they're in a hallway. And on one side of the hallway, it says designated buyer's agents. And on the other side of the hallway, it says designated seller's agents. Here's the thing. Not everybody's going to leave the hallway. Only the people in the buyer's bubble go through the door that say designated buyer's agents.
And if we wanted to, you could say two different doors, seller designated, buyer designated.
Right,
Not
exactly.
everybody's going to go
And then
through.
the other door that says seller's designated agents, only the people who are in the seller's bubble are going to go through that door. The other people, there might be 200 other people. Where are they going to stay?
Right.
In the hallway.
In the hallway that's labeled dual agency. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
Right? And so the firm, the rest of the firm is still sitting there in dual agency. It's just these folks that have been designated. So is it important who we put in these bubbles?
Yes.
Yes. Now, why did we choose for the buyer's bubble to be different here than the seller's bubble? That's a question I can't answer for you because that's an individual question this office has to make. Now, we have not talked about this terminology very much up to this point, but I'm going to introduce it to you. Anytime you have a group of brokers working together, anytime you have more than one broker working together, the real estate commission says somebody has to be in charge of that operation. One of them is the one we're going to talk to as the real estate commission. When we have any question about what this office has done, we're going to go first and foremost to the one of you that you tell us is what?
In charge.
In charge.
Now, here's the thing. From the standpoint of brokers, we all are equal. There is no difference between Travis or Seth or Leslie or Mom, because they are all brokers that work for Trav Talks LLC. But one of them, it's almost like they have to have an internal vote. One of them has to be listed as the one who is what?
In charge.
In charge. We call that person the broker in charge. In our office, that's me. I am the broker in charge of the office. What that means is, who do you think is going to make the decision in our office about who goes in which of these bubbles if we go into designated dual agent?
You will.
I will, as the broker in charge. Now, there might be a reason for me deciding that. What if, for example, this was a commercial transaction? And Seth, even though he brought this buyer to the firm, has never worked a commercial transaction. But Leslie has. Could I, as the broker in charge, recognize that's not going to work out very well for the buyer if I just put Seth by himself in that bubble, because Seth doesn't have experience with this kind of transaction? He might miss something. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I might decide, you know what? I'm going to put myself in there with Seth, just make sure he doesn't miss anything. Can I put myself as the broker in charge in one of these bubbles?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely I can. I don't have to, but I can. Could I, as the BIC, be outside of these bubbles?
Yes.
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 That's my choice. That's all internal. The Real Estate Commission does not care about that. So I don't want you to get hung up on it. The Real Estate Commission says that's why you're in charge. It's your job to figure out if you want one person in the seller's bubble and 12 in the buyer's bubble, or 2 in each bubble, or whatever you want to do is fine with us as the Real Estate Commission. Is everybody all right with that statement?
Yes.
You decide. That's why you're in charge. Christina?
Yes. So if the other side needs your help, since you are the one in charge,
Can't help her. Can't help her.
In a bubble.
I'm not in her bubble.
so if she needs help with somebody else, you still need to approve that. So
No.
they can join her bubble.
No, Christina. Once we create these bubbles, I'm not going to talk to her. If she tells me she needs help, she's already violated the rule. She's not allowed to speak to me outside of her bubble. She does not operate on the same team I do for this transaction. She's going to have to figure it out by herself, which was the danger of putting her in that bubble by herself in the first place. So as the broker in charge, does the broker in charge have a big responsibility to make sure whatever they do to set up these bubbles, that they have anticipated these problems before they come up?
Right.
Yes.
Because once you put them in the bubbles, they're in the bubbles.
Right.
And that's the danger of doing designated dual agency. See, Christina, what you want is a magic answer. That doesn't exist. Agency never has a magic answer. If the shit hits the fan here, Leslie's going to have to deal with it by herself, because she's the only one that was put in that bubble. And you cannot midstream go, wait, we made a mistake. Too damn bad. Too bad. So you better not put her in that bubble by herself unless you trust her to be what?
Knowledgeable about it.
Knowledgeable and know what's going on. Now can you see why it might make sense to put 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people in that bubble, so that they have each other to rely on in case they have questions?
Yes.
Right? Now, Kylie said, what about like with other listings she might have? Could you help her with those? Of course, because in other listings, we're not in what?
In a
Designated dual agency. Remember, folks, this only exists for that one single transaction. This only exists for that one single transaction. That's the only time we have to build this wall of division. Danielle?
So I guess I'm getting a little confused. Would it be beneficial, since the BIC has to know everything, would it be beneficial for the BIC to be in one of these circles since they have to oversee?
Here's the thing, Danielle. That's for that BIC to decide. I appreciate the question. That's your opinion. Do you think there are going to be BICs out there who say, you know what, I always want to be in one of the two bubbles?
Sure.
Yes.
Sure. Are there going to be BICs out there who say, I would never be in one of the two bubbles because I don't want to put myself on one side or the other, right?
Yes.
And the Real Estate Commission says those are both just fine and dandy. They leave it up to the broker in charge.
So
I
if the
get where your
broker in
mind's
charge
going.
is in one of the bubbles, then are they still overseeing?
No, not for that one transaction.
Okay.
They can't because,
Right.
again, they have put themselves on one side of the thing. And that's something they have to weigh out. Remember, the Real Estate Commission does not tell you that's the smart way to do your business. The Real Estate Commission simply says, this is legal. That's it. Speed limit. Here's the speed limit. You decide how much you want to drive. How fast you want to drive is up to you. Here's the speed limit. Right?
You know, and Danielle, we get where your mind's going. This is the best way the commission has been able to dress up a pile of shit.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. That's the best.
I mean,
This is the best they can come
listen.
up with.
Recognize this is meant to address the problems of dual agency. Are there going to be some problems that this creates of its own?
Yes.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's no perfect answer. The perfect answer was not to be in dual agency in the first place.
Right.
We
And I think-
already crossed that.
Right. Okay. You guys that are asking this question, you know the answer to this question. If the BIC is not in a bubble, can they get advice from their BIC?
No, because here's the thing, folks. Everybody in the bubble owes everything they know and every advice they can give to the client, correct?
To that bubble.
If you're not in one of the bubbles, you can't give advice to one of the people that's in the bubble because what are they going to do with that advice?
Send it to the other
They're going to
side.
use it. They're going to give it to the client. You can't do that. The only people who can give advice at all in this transaction are the ones in the bubbles, and they can only give advice. So here's the thing: if the BIC's not in one of these bubbles, and if I put Leslie in one and Seth in the other, and Leslie comes to me and says, "I have a question on this transaction," I'm gonna look at her and go, "No, the hell you don't.
Right.
Not one that's gonna get answered anyway. I'm so sorry."
So, Rose, Brian, to answer your question, no. Asking the question to the BIC is the BIC playing both sides, and that it don't exist.
It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. That's why building these walls is so important. You need to understand that these walls, right? Janet said, can mom chat with the designated dual agents? Of course she can chat with them, but she can't give them what?
Advice.
She can't tell them what they should be doing in the transaction because she's not on one team or the other.
Right.
She can certainly.
So-
In fact, if she wants to be a sounding board for everybody, could she do that? Could she sit there and listen to Seth gripe about what Leslie's doing, and then listen to Leslie gripe about what Seth's doing?
Yes, but she just got to be quiet.
But she's got to be neutral. Got to be neutral. She's got to be neutral, which is what a dual agent already do. Okay. Now, Stephen says, what does the BIC actually do in this example if the BIC is outside? If the BIC is outside, the BIC does what they always do in a dual agency situation. What does everybody who is a dual agent do?
Remain neutral.
Remains neutral. And so if the BIC is not in one of these bubbles, that's exactly what they do. They remain neutral. Here's what that means. If somebody who is in the bubble comes to the BIC and says, I need help, you say to them what?
Too bad, too sad.
Too bad.
So sad.
I cannot help you on this transaction. I cannot give you help on this transaction. I'm not in the bubble with you. You better talk to somebody who's in the bubble with you. So that brings us to the point of, would a smart BIC put individuals in these bubbles, or would a smart BIC, in my opinion, put multiple people of multiple different ability levels in these bubbles and say, here's somebody who can help you if and when you run into problems?
Absolutely.
Yes, multiple.
Right?
Every answer that question that you guys are asking, I say it with love, but if you'll realize, it's all the same answer. It just keeps coming right back to the same answer. Are they in the bubble? All right, no.
Are you in a bubble? Then you can help your side. If you're not in a bubble, you can't help either side. Simple as that. And it's up to the broker in charge to decide who's in the bubbles. Talk to me. Are we getting it?
Yes.
Yes.
That is designated dual agency. But I want to be clear. Don't make the assumption that we are in designated dual agency. That is where you're going to run off the rails on the test. Here's what you're going to here's what you're going to see on the test. You're going to see Seth is a broker associate of Trav Talks LLC, and he's representing a buyer client in a transaction. Leslie is a broker associate also of Trav Talks LLC and is representing a seller in a transaction. You're going to see that and you're going to go, designated! No. And you're going to be wrong. Literally, this is going to be the sound you hear when you submit that answer. Mm-hmm. Because all we told you was that there were two brokers affiliated with the same office, and that office represented the buyer and the seller. What kind of agency is that, folks?
Dual agency.
That's dual agency. There's nothing in what I just said that made you know it was designated. And if you don't know for sure it's designated, and all you know is that we got one office, it's dual agency.
Right.
Here's what you have to look for. Now tell me, I want you to be honest and I want you to raise your hand when you hear the difference. Ready? Mm-hmm. Seth is a broker affiliate of Trav Talks LLC, and he is representing a buyer in a transaction. Leslie is also a broker affiliate of Trav Talks LLC and is representing a seller in a transaction. Have I said anything different so far?
No.
The buyer the buyer client becomes interested in the listing that Leslie is dealing with. Have I said anything different so far? No. We're still just in what? Dual agency. Still in dual agency. Seth advises the buyer that the buyer should offer significantly less than list price based on, you all should have your hand up. Your hand should have,
Advice now.
because Seth did what?
Gave advice.
Gave advice. If the firm is a dual agent, folks, and somebody within the firm is giving advice, right there's the difference. That's how you know we're in designated dual agency.
And don't get caught up about like, well, they never said if they authorize it or not. That's not what they're asking. They're saying, what is this a situation of a designated dual agent?
That's exactly right. And as soon as you know, okay, we're in dual agency, then you start hunting. Are they giving advice? Are they giving advice? Are they giving advice? If you never see anything where they're giving advice, we're just in what?
Dual
agency.
But the minute one of them says, I think you should do this, or we advise you to do that, or we think you should do this, they're giving what?
Advice.
And that puts us in designated dual agency.
And so it might also, Travis, say something along the lines of, which of the following is true? And it could say something like, Seth and Leslie are allowed to give advice if they're in a designated dual agency situation.
Yep.
Or that kind of deal. So don't just exposing you to what you might be looking for on the test.
Right. So what is the big differentiator that you're going to be looking for to know, oh, I'm looking at designated dual agency, not just true.
Any advice?
Advice, exclusive.
Because here's the way you should think about it. When you're in single agency, we give what? Advice. When we're in co-brokerage, we give what?
Advice.
When we get in dual agency, we what?
Don't give advice.
Do not give
advice. So if you've decided, okay, we're in dual agency, you should be thinking in your brain, no advice, no advice, no advice. And then you come across, well, they're giving advice. They're in dual agency and they're giving advice. Oh, that's what? Designated. Does everybody, are you following me on that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want you to get Sam real quick. Get him. Just because I think you might be able to explain it better.
No.
So Sam said, so in an exam, advice equals dual. No, absolutely not. Dual equals no advice.
I know, I mistyped. I'm sorry. That's what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah. So no advice means dual agency. True dual agency is the only type of agency we have where we don't do our job. Think about it that way. True dual agency is the only type of agency we have where we don't give the client what?
Advice.
In single agency, whether it's single agency exclusive seller or single agency exclusive buyer, do we give advice to our client?
Yes.
In co-brokerage, do we give advice to our client?
Yes.
In designated dual agency, do we give advice to our client?
Yes.
In dual agency, do we give advice to our client?
No.
No. It's the only form of agency where we don't give advice. But here's the thing. Don't jump to the assumption that we're giving advice. If you have only established, okay, they both hired the same firm. then you know we're in dual agency.
Mhm.
And you have to say no advice until you have been given more information, like they are giving advice. Now you know designated dual agency.
And so Jessica also asked a really good question. So when do you present the option of designated dual agency? When they say they're giving advice. And then also, Sam also followed up with, they won't explicitly say designated. Never.
Never. You'll never see designated dual agency in a scenario on a test.
Sentence.
You might see it as an answer choice, but what they're not asking you to pick the word. They're asking you to find the situation that matches it, right?
Right.
But to Jessica's question, when do you present the option of designated dual agency? Same time you present the option of dual agency. I mean, here's the thing. If you're sitting in the car and you're asking that buyer, are you really sure you want to give up our advice? You really sure you want to see this house badly enough to give up our advice? Don't we have to get their permission for that?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yes. Here's the truth, folks. You got to get permission for, remember Seth's hallway analogy?
That will save you.
What do we have to get permission for first before we can even bring up the subject of designated dual agency?
Dual agency.
Dual.
We
The
have to
crappy
get
version.
permission for the shitty version, dual agency, because we got to get everybody in the hallway first. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
So we have to tell the buyer, this is not in your best interest. Do you want to do it anyway? We have to tell the seller, this is not in your best interest. Do you want to do it anyway? And they've both said what?
Yes.
Yes. I'm good with giving up advice. Now that they've said, I'm good with giving up advice, now that we got them in the hallway that says dual agency, we can then say, all right, I got a better alternative for you. We could be designated dual agents, in which you wouldn't have all of us on your side, only some of us would be representing you, but the good news is you'd get advice back. Or we can stay here in this hallway where you have all of us, but you don't get advice from any of us. Or a few of us could step to the side in this room and be your designated buyer's agents, and you can get advice from the few of us that go in that room with you. Keeping in mind, if you go in that room, the seller's going to go in this room over here with a few of us, and they're going to get advice from those few. So which do you prefer? All of us stay in the hallway here together and neither one of you get advice, or we split off in these two little separate rooms where you can get advice? What do you think most buyers and sellers are going to say when given that choice?
They would
Get a room.
Get a room.
Yeah, they want advice.
They want advice. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
Now, here's what I want to stress to you, because this is another assumption you're going to make. Not every office practices dual agency. Not every office practices designated dual agency. This is always up to who? Who is the real estate commission going to empower in every office to decide the type of agency that office offers?
A bit.
Broker in charge. So the real estate commission is going to say to the broker in charge, you don't have to do dual agency as an office, and they will make that decision for their office. The real estate commission is going to say to the broker in charge, you don't have to do designated dual agency, but that's your choice if you want to do it. Are there going to be some BICs that choose, we don't want to do any type of dual agency?
Yes.
Yes. Will those
That menu board is
Well,
what
those-
the BIC chooses.
Yes, absolutely. Will those offices that say we don't do dual agency, will they be able to offer designated dual agency? There's a question right there.
No.
No.
No. If you don't offer dual agency as an office, you certainly cannot offer designated dual agency. Remember, you got to get them in the hallway labeled what first?
dual.
Dual.
Agency. And so if you say as an office, we don't practice dual agency, you'll never get the opportunity to offer them designated dual agency. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
Okay? Even if your office offers dual agency, is your office going to be required to offer designated dual agency?
No.
No. That's going to be a choice of the broker in charge. Now, I will tell you, most offices that offer dual also offer what?
Designated.
Designated. But there are some weird offices out there. I mean, the truly weird offices that offer dual agency, but don't offer the improved version of that. Don't offer designated dual. You'd have to be weird and have to be a total
Could be
asshole
some
to offer,
shady mother.
to offer the really bad version, but not the better version, wouldn't you? Don't you think you'd have to be crazy?
Yeah.
Real shady.
And isn't it on the contract, Travis?
What contract? What the contract? What is-
Agency, your agency agreement.
Sure, but it doesn't mean you have to offer it. You don't have to offer it. You offer whatever you want to offer as an office, whatever the broker in charge. You don't have, like as a restaurant, do you have to have everything on the menu? Or if you own the restaurant and you manage the restaurant, do you get to choose what you put on your menu?
You choose.
You choose. Same thing is true here.
And would people not do it just because they don't think it's good and
They're
things are
weird
small enough?
people. They're weird people. The offices that don't do designated agency are weird. Let me give you an example of one that
I blame the BIC. First of all,
Yeah, you should
Or
blame
what
the
about
BIC because it's the BIC choice. Let me give you an example of an office that doesn't practice designated dual agency. There is this real estate firm named Trav Talks LLC that does not practice designated dual agency.
Is that what you were going to say?
It does practice dual agency,
Oh, so you
but
want
it does not practice designated dual
Are you
agency.
just too
Is
small?
that because there's only 4?
You don't have time for it. Over it.
Folks, now I showed you this as a visual. Let's get real. What's the likelihood that we're going to be able to keep that wall intact in our office?
No.
As small as we are, as close as we are, as much as we work together hours and hours and hours every day and tell each other everything, is this more a fantasy than a reality for our office right here?
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And so as the broker in charge, I am not engaging in that fantasy. I do not believe in telling our clients that we can isolate ourselves off like this when I don't believe that we can. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yeah.
Now, if we brought another 20 agents in, or even another 5 agents, another 5 brokers into our office, do you think I would probably change my position on designated dual agency very quickly?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, because the bigger you are, the less overlap your brokers have with each other, the more likely they are to be able to do designated dual agency and not have to worry about building a wall. If I had 200 people in my office, when I ran an office of 125, do you think I did designated dual agency in that office?
Yes.
Yes.
Every day, all day. All day. Janet said, why would a firm not do dual? Well, Janet, some firms, some offices just don't believe in the conflict of interest. And I'll be honest with you, this is something I debate with. I don't believe in the conflict of interest of dual agency, but ultimately, here's where I come down on that. I feel like my clients should have the opportunity to decide. I feel like we tell them dual agency is not in their best interest, but ultimately it's not for us to decide. It is for them to decide. Because if we as a firm say we don't do dual agency, what would we have to tell our buyer clients who wanted to see one of our listings?
You can't see
You
it.
can't.
You can't see it.
Can't see it at all.
Can't see it. What would we have to tell our sellers about that buyer that's begging to see their listing?
Sorry.
They can't see it.
I'm sorry, they can't see it because you're our client and they're our client. And to me, I don't want to be in that position as an office. I don't want to put my brokers in that position. So I've decided that even as much as I don't like dual agency and not being able to give advice, we would much rather warn our clients and have them still have the ability to make that choice. I'm not saying that's right. I'm saying that's the business decision that I made. Do you all see how the difference I mean between what the real estate commission says is legal versus what you're going to have to decide you want to do when you're out in the real world,
Yes.
right? You just because dual agency is legal doesn't mean I automatically have to do it as an office. Just because designated dual agent, could we legally as an office practice designated dual agency?
Yes.
Yes, but I don't believe we would be very good at it. I know Seth and I know Leslie. They ain't keeping nothing secret from each other. There's no way. There is no way. And I know me. I'm not keeping nothing secret from nobody. So the designated dual agency is not going to work in our office. Erica, what's up?
All right, real quick, just reiterate what you're saying. So if you have a client who you have a listing and the client, you have a listing and the client, which is the buyer, is your client, and you also have a listing,
So the seller's also our client.
right?
So we're in dual agency.
Right, you're in dual agency, like we're discussing, and that you have a house that is exactly what the person wants. You can't tell them if you already know they're asking for certain things, and they say, "I need this, I need that, I need this," and you're like in your mind, like, "Man, this is the perfect house," but I can't say anything. Is that correct?
If we don't, you can say it's the perfect house, but you can't look at it. because we don't practice. If your office doesn't practice dual, see, you don't like that answer, Erica. And here's the truth. I don't care that you don't like that answer. That's the legality of it. If my office doesn't practice, because here's what I want to ask you. If my office doesn't practice dual agency, how in the world are we supposed to show it to them? We already, you just said we represent them. You just said we represent the seller. The only way to show it to them is if we're in what?
Yeah, been designated.
In dual agency. In dual agency. And if our office doesn't practice dual agency, that's not an option. So we can't show it to them, period.
Oh, okay.
You better learn to tell people no if you're going to have that kind of a policy. But that's why we don't have that policy, because I don't want to say to a client, you can't look at it under any circumstances. What I say to our clients is, it's not in your best interest to look at this one because you would lose our advice. But if you really, really, really want to, we can do that. That's my decision as the broker in charge to allow that. Does that help?
Yeah, I just have to keep in mind that you can show it. It's just the advice part. I don't know why.
I can show it if my office practices dual agency, but if my office doesn't practice dual agency, it is a flat no. Or if either the buyer or seller says, no, I'm not okay with dual agency, it's a flat no.
Got it.
There will be people which you have to tell them, no, you can't look at it, but I really want to. No, you can't look at it. Because even if the buyer's like, but I'm okay with not getting advice, it's not just about the buyer, it's also about who?
The seller.
The seller.
firm
They
and the
got
seller.
and the firm. Everybody's got to agree to go into this dual agency thing. And if somebody's not in agreement, we ain't moving forward with that showing. It's just the way it's just the way it works. Christina?
Yes, so I'm just following up on what she just said. So the same thing that she's saying, and let's say that I know that my firm does practice the dual and also the designating one.
Okay.
I mentioned to my client, well, this listing, we can go into dual and also do a designating agent.
You can't do it like that. You can't just word vomit everything out there at one time. You have to get permission for the shitty version first.
Okay.
They have to be okay with the shitty version, because here's why. If something occurs during that transaction and the designated agency breaks down, what kind of agency would they be in at that point in time?
Dual.
They would be in dual. So you have to get their permission for the awful version first. You have to make sure, are you okay, worst comes to worst, not getting advice in this transaction before you ever mention designated dual agency. Is everybody okay with that?
Bad news first and then a little good.
Bad news first. Get their permission for, it's sort of like when you have surgery. Any of you ever had surgery? What's the first thing the doctor says to you?
The bad stuff.
There's a 15% chance you will die. Are you okay with that? Well, shit, no, not really, but I mean, I guess I got to be if we're going to have surgery. Have you ever done that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as you go in there to do surgery, that's the first thing to say to you. Well, there's a 12% chance you'll never wake up. Well, thanks. I appreciate that. But they have to give you what first? Worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Because if you're not okay with the worst case scenario, guess what they're not going to do that day?
The surgery.
They're not going to do the surgery. And so if we say to that buyer, hey, this is one of our listings. Worst case scenario is you love it, you want to make an offer, but you're not going to be able to get any advice. Are you okay with that? If they're not okay with that, we're not going to do a showing.
You have to get your permission.
We got to have their permission. Now, once you get permission for that one, can we say, I do have a better alternative to offer you. Assuming your office practices designated dual agency, could you then talk to them about designated dual agency?
Sure, yes.
Yes. But it has to be one then the other. Okay? Alexia said, if they contact the seller and they let them see it, could they sell it to your buyer anyway? Listen, Alexia, we're not worried about compensation. We're not paying attention to compensation. Here's the thing. If they contact the seller, they have violated our agency agreement. They hired us to do what in the transaction as a buyer?
Provide advice.
To represent them. That means that whole transaction has to run through who? Us. Here's the problem. Y'all are like 3-year-olds. You tell a 3-year-old no. But, no. And you've got to understand that those are the problems that come with dual agency. You don't want to accept that at some point in your career, you're going to have to look a buyer in the face and say what to them when they want to look at that house?
No.
No. Your ass is not going in there under any circumstances. If you go in there, I'm going to call the police. You go into prison. You're not really going to do that. But you need to think of it that way. There is no working around it. If they won't give their permission for dual agency, or if your office doesn't offer dual agency, or if the seller won't give their permission, what's the answer?
No.
No. You're not going in there under any circumstances. It's not fun, but it's the reality of what we have to do. Is that sinking in?
So somebody sent this message to me here privately. So BIC can allow dual agency even if they do not practice dual agency. They're going to authorize it or they're not.
I don't know what that means. Oh, so a BIC can
Maybe
allow...
the firm doesn't practice it, but the BIC controls what the firm does.
Right. The BIC is making the decision for the office, period. So if a BIC allows dual agency, then the BIC allows anybody in the firm, including themselves, to practice dual agency. I mean, you're making a decision because the clients aren't hiring us individually. They're hiring what?
The firm.
The firm.
The office, right? They're hiring the entire office. Y'all really need to get out of saying the firm, because you're going to keep telling yourself that every office is a firm. Newsflash, every office is what? Not a firm. Some of them are sole proprietorships. So you need to really get yourself out of that. You're talking yourself into missing questions. Stop saying they hire the firm. They hire the what? Office. Which might be a firm, but it might also be a what?
Sole proprietorship.
Proprietorship. Most of them are what?
Firms.
Because most of them have created a company. But I'm telling you, it's really important to get that down, that some offices are not going to be firms. Not every office is a firm. Okay? Erica, did you still have a question? I see your hand still up, or was that from earlier? You're good? Okay. Good. Now, here's the thing, and I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again now. If you're having a problem wrapping your mind around designated dual agency at all, you don't actually have a designated dual agency problem. You have a problem with what?
Dual agency.
Likely dual agency, but something other than designated. You either have a problem with exclusive agency or dual agency. Because if you understand those truly, then designated is a very easy transition in your mind. You don't have a problem with designated, most likely. Okay? Now, once we put somebody in a bubble, they no longer work for both the buyer and the seller. They only work for the one they're in the what?
Bubble.
The bubble with. You got a buyer bubble, you got a seller bubble. Not everybody in the office has to be in one of those bubbles. Can the bubbles pretty much be made up any way we want to in designated dual agency? Can the bubbles consist of pretty much whatever we want?
Yes.
Absolutely, they sure can. Absolutely. Except there's only one exception there. And this is one of those things where people chase their tails on this, and it is so easy. If somebody starts asking you a question about can the bubbles have this and this, the answer should automatically be what?
Yes.
Yes. Because every situation is yes, except how many?
One.
There's only one no. So I've given you examples of acceptable bubbles. Can you have non-provisional brokers in this bubble and non-provisional brokers in the other bubble against each other? Yes. Can you have provisional brokers in the buyer's bubble and non-provisional brokers in the seller's bubble?
Yes.
Can you have provisional brokers in the buyer's bubble and provisional brokers in the seller's bubble?
Oh, yes.
Yes. Can you have the broker in charge in one bubble and non-provisional brokers in the other bubble?
Ooh,
Yes. What's your answer to all of these, folks?
Yes.
Yes. Because we haven't gotten to the how many that aren't allowed?
One.
One. Every other combination is acceptable. 5 provisional brokers in one bubble for the seller and 1 non-provisional broker in the other bubble for the buyer. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
Yes.
Resounding.
Is everybody okay with that so far?
Yes.
Those are all acceptable. I'm not saying they're smart, because that's going to be the other thing. Here's the one that y'all going to get hung up on. But why would they do this? Why would the big be in one? And why would aren't they supposed to give them advice? Because they're fucking stupid. That's all I can tell you. But the Real Estate Commission allows you to be that. There's no rule that says you can't be that. Remember, we're not here to talk about how you're doing the business. We're talking about your speed limit, right?
Yes.
And all of this is within the speed limit. Are you feeling me?
Yeah.
Right? Okay. The one that's not within the speed limit is a provisional broker in one of the bubbles, like we'll say the seller's bubble. You put a provisional broker in there. The only thing that's not allowed is putting the broker in charge in the opposite bubble. Because, if you will remember, how did we describe provisional brokers? I'm not talking about how to get rid of the provisional status. We haven't talked about that yet. But how do we describe provisional brokers? Ones that must have what?
Supervision.
Supervision. They must have supervision. Think about it. If I put the provisional broker in the seller's bubble, and I put the BIC in the buyer's bubble, the BIC can't do what with that provision?
Supervise.
They can't supervise them because they're on opposite teams. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
Right.
Now, could the BIC be in the bubble with the provisional broker?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. That's possible. The one exception, the one that's not allowed, is a provisional broker, one who has to have the training wheels in one bubble, and their broker in charge who is supposed to be supervising them where?
On
On the other side.
The opposite bubble. Now, could you put a provisional broker on the seller side, non-provisional broker on the buyer side, and BIC not be in either bubble? Would that work?
Yes.
Yes. Remember, there's only one that doesn't work.
Right. A provisional broker can be in the same bubble with their BIC. I think you just said that, but I want to emphasize on that.
Yes, right. Don't get in your head, oh, no BIC with a PB. Yes, BIC with a PB is fine. BIC with a PB is fine. It's BIC
can't be against
a PB that they supervise, and it doesn't work.
Don't invent anything else.
And if you think about it, isn't that a very logical rule?
Yes.
Right? It just makes sense. There's no way you can supervise somebody you're working against.
And now I'm only going to cut y'all so a little bit of slack. If you're asking, what's the difference between non-provisional and provisional? Only a little, but you should know that at this point.
So provisional means they have to be what? They don't have a choice.
Supervised.
Supervised. What does non-provisional or not provisional mean?
No supervision.
Not have to be.
Doesn't automatically mean no supervision. It means they don't what?
Have to be.
They don't
Required.
have to be supervised. They have a choice of whether they could be supervised or they could not be supervised. It means they're not required to be supervised. Provisional means supervision required. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
And Seth is not a provisional broker. Seth is a non-provisional broker, just like Travis is a non-provisional broker, which means we both have the option of operating either supervised or what?
Unsupervised.
Or not supervised, right? If someone like you all who gets their license is provisional, you don't have that choice. You must be what at all times?
Supervised.
Supervised. Now, I'm going to back up to this previous slide. Do you think there are some on this list which I, as a broker in charge, would never have my office engage in because to me they look like, I just wouldn't go there? What do y'all think?
Provisional.
Yes.
Sure. And that's fine. Again, the Real Estate Commission doesn't tell you how to run the business. The Real Estate Commission says these are the things that are legal and these are the things that are illegal, and you got to look at the things that are legal and decide what you want to do of those things. So the Real Estate Commission has basically said all of this is legal. You have to decide as the broker in charge if it's smart for your office. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
Now, I'll tell you another one that I would never do as a BIC. Me, personally, Never. Right here.
Two rookies.
Two rookies, one representing the seller, one representing the buyer. They're both going to naturally have a bunch of what?
Question.
Questions. And who are they going to come to for those questions?
The BIC.
The BIC. How is the BIC going to remain neutral in that thing?
He's not.
Now, the real estate commission says theoretically that's legal, but I'm like, hell to the no. Not in my office, it's not. But here's the thing. That's my personal decision. We're not going to be tested on my personal decision. You're going to be tested on speed limit, right? Always speed limit. And what's the only one that the real estate commission says that's speeding? You can't do it.
Provisional.
The BIC against a provisional that they're supervising. Are we all good on that?
Yes.
Okay, good. Folks, that's designated dual agency. Now, just like dual agency, we need permission from which one of our clients?
Both.
Both, right? Remember, we've already gotten permission. This was Christina's question earlier. We've already gotten permission for dual agency. We would not even be having the discussion about designated dual agency unless we had first gotten their permission for what? Dual agency. Look at this form right here. I've given you a little snippet from from both a buyer agency agreement and a listing agreement. Look at this right here. Door number 1. Door number 2. Look at it. It says the buyer authorizes the firm to act as a dual agent. That's a choice. Or the buyer desires exclusive representation and does not authorize the firm to act in the capacity of a dual agent. Folks, if the buyer in door number 1 says, you know what, I don't authorize dual agency, I want exclusive representation, do we even bring up door number 2 to them? No, we can't. Is that making sense for everybody now? Right? We can't. But if by comparison, we're dealing with a seller and on door number 1, because they get the same 2 questions, if the seller says, oh yeah, I'm good with dual agency, can we now talk to them about door number 2 and give them the, if our firm offers it, the option of designated dual agency? Yes. And if they're okay with that, they would also give their permission for that. Now we have their permission for both dual agency and what? Designated dual agency. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay. So we need permission just like any form of dual agency. And folks, that is all the different forms of agency that is available in sales transactions. We've gone through single agency representing the seller. We've gone through single agency representing the buyer. We've gone through, what's the one where 2 offices are involved?
Co-brokerage.
Brokerage. Right? Then we've gone through the one where there's only 1 office involved, but that 1 office is representing both sides of that transaction. That's what?
Dual agency.
Dual agency. Now notice I didn't say just bringing both sides. I said actually representing both sides, right? Okay. That's dual agency. And then we've gone through the last one, which is 1 office that's agreed to represent both sides at the same time, and then gone a step further and created teams within that office, a seller's team and a buyer's team. That's called what?
Designated dual agency.
Designated dual agency. Folks, those are all the available forms of agency. That's the menu board. When you're talking to a buyer or a seller, those are the things. Now, just because that's the full menu, does that mean your office will have the full menu? Or can an office choose to offer only limited choices from that menu?
They can choose
limited choices. Our office, as an example. As an example, do we offer the full menu or have we chosen to limit that menu down a little bit?
Just a little.
We've limited it down. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, that's all the forms of agency. I'm going to pause the video here for just a second. We're going to take just a quick rest. All right. Let me go ahead and share my slides with you one more time here. How are we feeling as I get the slides shared? How are we feeling about agency so far? You guys are asking good questions and making good comments. I feel that's a good thing. How are you feeling?
I feel pretty good.
Great.
Pretty good.
Yeah. Well,
I
I'm
might have
telling
to go through the slides again, but I feel like
Yes.
like we said earlier, like the more that you go over it, it kind of like just begins to stick in a sense. Like I'd be walking around the house and I'm just like, oh yeah.
you want to hear the
Yes.
you want to hear the good news about that? If you asked everybody who's taken this class over the last decade, 15 years at the end of the class, what the hardest thing in the class was for them, I would say probably 85 to 90% would immediately say agency. Agency. Yes. It was agency. And so here's the thing. If you can get yourself comfortable with agency, and I know we are tackling it right here at the beginning, you have the hardest information in the class, according to most people, whipped. Because agency is one of those things where everything is situational, and that's what makes it hard. Everything's situational. The answer changes based on the situation. So you have to really pay attention to the situation. As you read an agency question, what's the mental question you have to be asking yourself the whole time? Who do I represent?
Client.
Yes.
Who's my client?
Who has hired me?
Who's hired me, right?
You guys are getting dragged through the mud, like in the beginning, first thing off the bat. But I think it's going to do good.
I do. I think getting agency earlier so that we can use it as sort of an anchor for everything the rest of the class, because this is what it'll allow me to do. Every time we come to a different topic, like when we come to finance, I can go back and say, well, you remember when you were a buyer's agent, you got to give them advice. Is this something you need to give them advice about, the type of loan they get? See, if we haven't covered agency, I can't really throw that in there. So I'm doing it early so that my goal here is to be able to constantly remind you of it as we go through the class so that it never slips away. And I think also there's something to be said for getting you early when your brain is fresh. Before you've gotten a lot of things in the way, and because it is the most important information and it is the hardest some ways to absorb, getting it out of the way early. I'm hoping this is very unique. I mean, when I told other instructors I was going to do agency first, the eye rolls, I mean, like, you would not believe the reaction from people. You're going to do what first? What?
Yeah.
Like, no way, I would never do that. So this is very different. And I'm hoping it's an experiment that works out well. I will tell you, I'm very pleased. Because in some ways, I really feel like you all are picking it up better than students have done in the middle of class. Because I think you haven't gotten frazzled yet, number one. And also, I'm hoping it helps that with the other things so that you don't learn other things in a wrong context. We can constantly come back and lay it in there in the, within the confines of agency. So that's our goal. But to understand agency is one thing. For you to understand it. To be able to explain it to customers is another thing entirely. Notice I didn't say to explain it to clients. Why do you think I didn't say to be able to explain agency to clients? Why did I say being able to explain it to customers? There's an interesting question right out of the gate. Why do you think I said to you we need to be able to explain agency to customers rather than saying we need to explain agency to clients? What do y'all think? Anybody got an idea?
So they can understand how to be a client?
There you go. How in the world? I don't know who said it. I missed who said it, but what a great answer. So they can understand how to be a client. Kathleen said in the chat, let them know what they're getting into. Amen. Right? How in the world can they go from being a customer to being a client if they don't know what they're getting into? If they don't know what they're hiring us for? How do we bring them a meal if they never ordered anything from the menu? And so being able to explain to someone, a buyer customer or a seller customer, this is what agency is. And if you want to hire me, you're going to have to make some choices, is really important. And we call that, folks, agency disclosure. So I want you to associate within your mind, whenever you see that phrase, disclosing agency or agency disclosure, all that means is giving customers their choices. And letting them decide, do they want to hire you at all? Because, first of all, is that a choice that a customer can make? No, dog, I'm good. I don't need to hire you. Is that a choice they can make? Yeah.
Yes.
Some customers will make that choice. They don't want to hire us, and that's fine. Will some of them make the choice to hire us?
Yes.
Yes. And of course, some of them will hire us as exclusive buyers agents, and some of them will hire us as exclusive sellers agents, and some of them might hire us as a dual agent, and some of them might hire us as a designated dual agent. But ultimately, it's up to them how they hire us. What's our job as the licensee is to give them the choices. And that's what we're going to focus on. We're going to focus on the choices and explaining the choices to these customers in a way that they can understand it. Now, the Real Estate Commission has given you a form. Now, I think they mean the form to help. And it can be very helpful if you approach it in the right way. I think the downside of having a form for this is people pay too much attention to the form, to the paperwork, because it looks official, and not enough attention to the conversation. Explaining agency, folks, is about the conversation. It's not just about presenting somebody with a piece of paper. I don't know about y'all, but to me, the most frustrating thing in the world somebody can do is say, oh, here, you need to sign this because the Real Estate Commission says you got to sign it. How many of you all want to just slap the shit out of somebody when they shove a piece of paper in your face and tell you you have to sign it?
That's going to make them shut down.
Yeah.
Of course,
You don't
it
know
would
whether
make
to
them.
sign it.
Shane, I completely agree. Of course, it's going to make them shut down. It would make me shut down. I'm not. You tell me I got to sign something. I can tell you what I ain't doing.
Sign.
I ain't signing it, and I'm not listening to you anymore either. So to me, we're going to talk about the form because they're going to test you on the form, and the form is a necessary part of our job. But it's the explanation that will go so much further with that. It's the explanation of why you're giving them this form. What do you think right out of the gate? What do you think is going to be the best explanation of why you're giving them this form? What if you were if you were talking to somebody about everything that we just learned over the last couple of days, and you knew you were about to have a conversation with them about that? What would you say to kind of open this conversation before you give them the form? Why are you giving them the form? Is it because the Real Estate Commission?
To protect them.
I want to protect you. I want to protect you. I look at Natalie's comment. You need to know your options. Isn't that a great way to open this conversation? I'm giving you this because you need to know your choices. You need to know, what was our expression? I am an agent, but I'm not what?
Your
I'm not your agent.
Your agent.
I could be if you decide to what?
hire
If you decide to hire me. But you haven't done that yet. Now, you're probably never going to use the word client or customer. Certainly not the word customer. You're never going to do that. They don't understand it, and they don't need to. But they do understand you not being their agent. How many of you think that's a powerful statement right there? Just say to somebody right now. I want to make sure you understand something before we go any further. You haven't hired me, so I'm not your agent yet. I'd like to be, but right now I'm not your agent. How many of you think that right there is going to get their attention and they want to hear more?
I do.
I am the agent.
To me, that's a very logical way to open this conversation. I want to talk to you about your options. Right now, you don't have an agent. At least not for me. I'm not your agent. I'd like to be, maybe. Maybe you would like for me to be, but we haven't done that yet. So let's talk about that for a second. I think that gets their attention.
Yeah.
And so the form, the document that we give them at that point in time is called the Working with Real Estate Agents brochure. The Working with Real Estate Agents brochure. That document is required by the Real Estate Commission. That document is required anytime you're dealing with a buyer or seller customer. Buyer or seller customer. Anytime you're dealing with a buyer or seller customer, that document is required. Why? Because we got to give them their choices. We got to give them their options. Now, the Real Estate Commission does not tell you how to do your business. I think we've established that pretty well, right? That they don't tell you how to do your business. They simply tell you what the rules and regulations are. So the Real Estate Commission will never tell you when is the appropriate time to give the Working with Real Estate Agents brochure. What they will tell you is when you're speeding, when you've waited too late, when you've broken the law by not giving it to somebody. Let's be clear. You can give this thing anytime you want to. Is there any such thing as too early from the standpoint of violating a real estate commission rule?
No.
No. But there is a such thing as too what?
Too late.
Too late. What do you think they're going to test you on? The best
Late.
time to do this from a business perspective, or when it's too late?
When it's too late.
But it's too late.
So when you're asked a question about disclosing agency, you're always looking for the answer that the person is too what?
Too late.
Too late. That's what they're going to test you on. That's what the rule is about. And the Real Estate Commission says that first substantial contact is the last possible moment. That if you go past first substantial contact with this customer and you have not gone over their options and you have not presented them with the Working with Real Estate Agents document, then you're too late. You've violated the rule. That does not mean you have to wait for first substantial contact. Could you give this to somebody as soon as you meet them, if that's what you want to do?
Yes.
Absolutely. Might seem a little awkward, but you could. I mean, if you stand in line at the grocery store and somebody says, hey, how was your day today? Well, let me just tell you, I am an agent, but I'm not your agent. And let me give you your options. They're going to look at you and be like, what the hell is it?
Yeah.
Right? The Real Estate Commission doesn't care about that. They don't care if you do it too early. They care if you do it too what? Late. And they say that going past this moment called first substantial contact is too late. So how many of you think we need to have a definition for first substantial contact?
Yes.
Yeah. Here's the thing. You will never see first substantial contact as the correct answer on a test. As a matter of fact, test taking strategy. When you see buzzwords like that on a test, like a phrase that we've talked about, it's never the answer.
Mm-hmm.
They put it in there as a fake out. They don't care that you know the phrase. They want to know, do you know the definition of first substantial contact? So let's talk about the definition, and that is right down here. First substantial contact, and the word substantial is the important part here, is the first time in a conversation with a customer, because remember, they haven't hired us yet. The first time in a conversation or communication. So could first substantial contact be via email?
Yes.
Could it be over the phone?
Yes.
Could it be in person?
Yes.
Yeah, it could be through a text message.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It is any communication with a buyer or seller customer where they give the licensee, that would be me, personal information about themselves that could be used against them in the transaction. Things that are juicy as far as the transaction goes. Now, they may give you personal information that's way too personal. They may tell you all about who they're dating and who they went out with last night. That is not first substantial contact because that has nothing to do with real estate. Can we all agree the Real Estate Commission does not care what color underwear they're wearing that day?
They don't care.
Right? That is personal confidential, but the Real Estate Commission doesn't care about it. So it's not all personal confidential information. It's real estate related personal confidential information. If somebody in the grocery store tells me, oh yeah, I've been looking for a house for a while because my husband lost his job last month and we really can't afford our house payment right now, so we got to find something smaller. Have we had first substantial contact, folks?
Yes.
Yes. They have clearly told me juicy, personal, confidential information about themselves that could be used against them in a real estate transaction. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
As a matter of fact, one of the ways that the Real Estate Commission says that we should think about first substantial contact is like the Miranda Rights. When somebody gets arrested, what's the first thing that any law enforcement officer is required to legally do in this country?
Do not say
Miranda Rights.
It can be used.
Read them, they're Miranda Rights. And I know some of you have heard them more up close and personal than others, but you've all heard them at least on television. How does the Miranda Rights start?
You have the right to remain silent.
You have the right to remain silent. In other words, you can stop talking now if you would like to, correct?
Yes.
But if you choose not to stop talking, What's the next part of the Miranda rights?
It'll be used against
Can be
you.
used against you.
Anything you say could potentially be used against you. Does that make sense for everybody?
That's a good way to think about it.
Folks, that is the exact approach the Real Estate Commission wants you to use with this customer. With this customer. What are we saying to them? The information you just gave me is what?
Personal.
It's personal. You have the right to do what?
Refuse to answer.
To stop talking. You have the right to be silent. You don't have to be silent. I'm more than happy to keep talking with you. But you have the right to do what? To be silent. Here's the risk, though. Anything you continue to say can and will be what?
Used against you.
Used against you. Because I'm an agent, but I'm not what?
Your agent.
Your agent.
Your agent. So, folks, do you see how this is going to work you right into the conversation about them hiring you if you do it correctly? If you give this warning correctly, can you say to somebody, listen, I appreciate you sharing with me and all, but here's the thing. I don't represent you. So it's really dangerous for you to keep sharing stuff about yourself because for all you know, I might be the agent on the house you just looked at. How many of you think that would stop a buyer dead in their tracks if you said that to them? Right? But in a good way, because you can follow it up with what? Here's the deal, though. If you wanted me to be your buyer's agent, you could tell me whatever you wanted to because I'd keep it confidential. How many of you think all of a sudden you just opened the conversation to getting hired right there?
Yeah.
Right there.
Yes.
By complying with the rule. By warning them and saying, you know what? I'm not your agent, but I could be. It's in your best interest to stop talking right now, unless you do what?
Unless you hire me.
Unless you hire me. Folks, that's the working with real estate agents disclosure right there. First and foremost, it's a warning. Stop talking. You're giving me information that I might have to use against you. So I'm going to give you some examples because what they're going to test you on the test is can you recognize first substantial contact? Remember, they're only going to test you on being too late. So they're going to want to know, can you recognize first substantial contact? Look at this one. It says real estate agent Karen meets Jack at his home on Main Street to discuss what it might be worth. And Jack says that he's curious because he lives alone now that his wife died. What do you all think? When Jack shares with Karen that the reason he wants to know the value of his house is that he lives by himself because his wife died, do you think the Real Estate Commission would consider that first substantial contact?
Yes.
Absolutely. Because here's the thing. Think about if you were on the other side of that transaction. If you were representing a buyer, would you not tell your buyer, listen, I think we can probably get a deal on this one because this poor old man now living by himself, his wife died, he just really needs to get out of here. Do you think you'd use that against him if you were representing a buyer?
Yes.
Yes. So he needs to stop what if he wants to protect himself?
Talking.
He needs to do one of two things. Either stop talking or what's the other option?
Hire.
Hire us.
Yeah.
Because if he hires us, can he keep talking?
Yes.
Yes.
We become the shoulder to cry on if you hire us, don't we?
Yes.
Right? And how many of you are starting to see why the Real Estate Commission requires us to do this? Right? And if done well, it can actually help you build a relationship with clients. If you just shove a piece of paper at somebody and say, the Real Estate Commission says I have to give you this, you shut them down, like Shane mentioned earlier. But if you present this in a way to them that says, you know what, I'm not your agent, but I could be. And so if you really feel like you need somebody to share those things with and somebody to get advice from about this thing, why don't you hire me? And then we can go from there. It's a really easy way to open that conversation. I don't know about y'all, but I'd be a lot more likely to hire that person if they broke it down to me like that.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And that's exactly the way I do it in the real world. And it has worked very well for me. So yes, I would say this is first substantial contact. Now, it's not first substantial contact the minute she goes and meets with him, because at that point, she's just giving him information. She has no idea why he wants to know what his house is worth. That's not first substantial contact. It's when he shares about himself. Is everybody following that?
Yeah.
Okay. It's not about her as the agent giving him information. It's about the customer giving information to the licensee. That's when we have to worry about first substantial context. How about this one? It says Tim is a new provisional broker who's hung his license with Keller Williams of Greenville and is going around the neighborhood knocking on doors and talking to homeowners about potentially selling their house. The James family is a married couple who owns the home at 242 Oak Drive, and they meet with Tim. After an introduction, Tim informs Mr. and Mrs. James that their house might sell for more than $400,000 in the current market. So let's read through that again. Tim's a new provisional broker who's hung his license with Keller Williams of Greenville. He's going around, hung his license just means that's who he works for. Okay. He's going around the neighborhood knocking on doors and talking to homeowners about potentially selling their house. The James family owns the home at 242 Oak Drive and they meet with him. Have we had first substantial contact yet?
No.
And I saw somebody said thinking about selling. Folks, that's not personal and confidential. That could not be used against them. The fact that they're thinking about selling, it doesn't tell us why they're thinking about selling or what they're thinking about selling for. Just the fact that they're merely thinking about selling would not be personal confidential. Okay. It says after an introduction, Tim informs Mr. and Mrs. James that their house might sell for more than $400,000 in the current market. Have we had first substantial contact? No. Here's the thing. We can't have first substantial contact when who is giving all the information?
The agent.
And the broker, the licensee. The licensee is the one giving the information. That's not going to be first substantial contact. Now, how about if they responded to him? Yeah, that sounds good because we really need at least $400,000 because our kids are going to Duke next semester and you have no idea how expensive that is. I don't know how we're going to pay that bill.
That's first substantial.
Now, that's first substantial contact because now they've given us motivation of why they need to sell and that they would really like to get a certain number. You see how that's the juicy stuff? Mm-hmm. Right? So this would not be an example of first substantial contact. That doesn't mean you can't give the working with real estate agents document. It just means it's not required yet. Is everybody all right with that?
Yes.
Okay. So don't choose the answer because it's going to be on the test as soon as they open the door. Is that going to be an answer choice on there?
Yes.
Yes. But that's not the deadline. They're testing you on the deadline. Look at this one. Dawn is a potential home buyer who's surfing the internet and looking at properties that are on the market. She's on the website of a local brokerage firm and clicks Get More Information. On the form where Dawn provides her contact information, she notes that she's not yet pre-qualified and may have some credit issues to work through. What do y'all think? Would this represent first substantial contact, even though she technically hasn't even talked to somebody yet?
Yes. The credit issue. Absolutely.
She has absolutely given licensees, because whoever's reading that form on the other end is going to be a licensee, and do they now have juicy personal information that could potentially be used against her? Yes. So when they've reached back out to her, they have to say, Dawn, thank you for filling out. Before we go any further, let me let you know. I'm an agent, but I'm not what?
I'm not your agent.
I'm not your agent. So let's not talk about your finances unless you decide you need an agent, in which case I'd love to be your agent, and then you can tell me anything. Right? Everybody see the difference?
Yes.
Good. Very good. Very good. So that would absolutely, in my opinion, represent first substantial contact. How about this situation right here?
Attends an open house.
Oh, hang on. Sorry. It would help if I stopped the music playing in the background. I just turned it down. I don't think we want. I don't think Barry White would be an appropriate backup music for that. There we go.
Attends an open house in Fuquay Arena. She is not represented by a real estate agent. Alicia enters the house and is immediately impressed by the floor plan. She asks Dawn, the listing agent, if the house is available for a quick move-in. Dawn says yes, and Alicia is enthused. She tells Dawn that she needs to purchase a home within 30 days to start a new job, and will send him an offer by the end of the day.
I heard somebody speak up. As soon as she said what?
30 days.
30 days.
I need to buy within 30 days. Don better be presenting what document to her?
Real estate
Working with
Working with real estate agents, and he better be explaining to her, I am an agent, but I'm not what?
Your agent.
Agent. And he's got to do all that before he gets back to the door at Walmart because he's on lunch break from being a door greeter, apparently, based on his attire. So he has to do all that before he has to go back and man the door. I'm pretty sure that vest says, "How may I help you?" on the back of it. I'm almost certain with that. So, yes, that would absolutely represent first substantial contact. That I think that sharing of information clearly represents first substantial contact, and you all were right on top of it. That Don would basically need to stop and say, "Okay, Alicia, before we go any further, I'm an agent, but I'm not your agent, and to protect you, to make sure you know what's going on here, let's talk about this form, and let's talk about the fact that you could hire me, but until you do, you shouldn't really tell me anything else." Isn't that being really sort of fair to this customer?
Being
Oh,
fair
yes.
and professional.
Yes.
Yeah, it's being professional, it's being fair. That's what we're expected to do with customers. Now, we're not expected to look out for Alicia's best interest. Let me point that out. If Alicia continues to share information about herself, have we done our job by warning her in the first place? What do y'all think?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And if she continues to overshare and vomit up information, that's on her.
Yep.
Because we shouldn't say to her, "You should stop talking now," after we've already warned her one time. Because we shouldn't give her what?
Advice.
And why should we not give her advice?
Because she's not a client.
A client. She's just a customer. It's not my job to tell a customer what to do or what not to do. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
We're not out here to protect everybody. We're here to protect who? Clients. I love that you all see that distinction. That's such a big step to see that distinction. So what we want to do is take a look at the form itself just real quickly and some of the boxes that are on the form. This is what the form looks like on the left-hand side of your screen here. And if you notice, it's one page and it says for sellers. Guess what? There's also a one-page version that says
For buyers.
buyers. So you're going to present the one that is appropriate for the situation. If you're talking to somebody that's a potential buyer, give them the one that says for buyers. If you're talking to somebody that you think is a potential seller, give them the one that says for sellers. If you're talking to somebody that says, "Well, we need to sell our house so we can buy another one," which version do you give them?
Both.
Both. Because if they hired you and they wanted to hire you to do both of those jobs, they would be hiring you how many times?
Twice.
Twice. Once as a seller and once as a buyer. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right? So it's situational. You give them the one that applies to them. Now, this is the rule. The rule says in every real estate, and I'm going to point this out, sales transaction. This is only required when we're selling stuff. Remember, we said that everything involving land is under the jurisdiction of the Real Estate Commission, right?
Correct.
So is a lease of a farm, is that a land transaction?
Yes.
Give them a land, yes.
Yes, absolutely. Would this be required in the lease of a farm?
No.
No, because it says it's only required in what kind of transactions?
Sales.
Sales. So if you're talking to a landlord, do you need to worry about this?
No.
No. If you're talking to a tenant, do you need to worry about this?
No.
No. If you're talking to
And
a buyer, do you need to worry about this?
Yes.
Or a seller, do you need to worry about this?
Yes. Nani asked, are builders required to provide this form to customers when they walk in to see a model home?
It's a great question. Here's the thing, and this is where you have to think about what we've already learned. Rather than just blurt out a question, you have to think about, okay, have we talked about that? We have. We've just not talked about it in the specific way you ask it, but we have talked about it. Who is the builder, folks?
The seller.
They're the seller.
Seller.
Do these rules ever apply to someone who's representing themselves in a transaction? No. Because remember, it's not a licensed activity unless you're representing who?
Others.
Someone else.
Or helping others in a transaction. So if a builder is there talking to potential buyers, they're talking to buyers as the seller. They don't need to do any of this. Does that make sense for everybody?
Right.
But if it's not the builder that's there, if it's the builder's what?
Agent.
Agent that's there at that model home. Would a builder's agent be required to do this when buyers come in?
Yes.
You better believe they would be, right? Because if they're the builder's agent, then they fall under the rule of, well, you're doing real estate for somebody else, and you're probably being paid for it, right?
Yes.
And that's when all these rules kick in. These are not rules for the public. These are rules for people with a real estate license.
Yes.
Really great question. Everybody understand that answer?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
So you kind of going back and applying the same rule. Now, right away, the form says a really important statement. This is not a contract. That's going to be a test choice. Does the working with real estate agents document create an agency relationship? Is this the document somebody signs to hire us?
No.
No. This is the warning document. This comes before they create an agency relationship. This is not binding in any way. This is not an agreement. This is a warning that we're giving to them. It says signing this disclosure only means you've what?
Received it.
It only means you received it. We only asked them to sign it as proof that we did what?
Gave it to them. Gave
it to them and we went over it with them. That's the only reason we asked for their signature. It is mandatory that we ask for their signature because it's mandatory for us to present it and go over it. The signature is just meant to serve as proof that we did our job. That's the only reason it's there. Look at this. Pretty much the same thing we've been saying all along. In a real estate sales transaction, it is important that you understand whether an agent represents you. How did I lead off this discussion? I am an agent, but I'm what?
Not your agent.
I'm not your agent. So it's important that you understand I am not your agent. It says, and then it talks about the rule. It says real estate agents are required to review this form with you. When?
Now.
First substantial
contact. Right now. We're talking about it now. That's exactly right. Now is when I'm required to review it with you. And that says before we ask for or get what from you?
Confidential information.
Any of your confidential information, okay? And then give you a copy of the form after you sign it. This is for your protection, and it really is for their protection, right? So that they don't keep giving us a bunch of personal confidential information. And look at this warning right here. I told you it was a warning form. Look at what it tells them not to do. It says, do not what?
Do not share.
Do not keep talking. Do not share your confidential information with a real estate agent, and don't, what have we told you not to do about agency ever?
Assume
that the agent is what?
Working on your behalf.
Working on your behalf, working for you until you have entered into a written agreement with the agent to represent you, until you've hired them. In other words, until you hire them, they're not your agent. How many of you feel like, holy crap, this is actually a pretty good form if people would actually pay attention to it and read the warnings here? This is pretty good form.
Please tell them.
When I go over it, I read that up there. You can't get any better than that.
I mean, they made it clear. I'm not your agent yet. Don't share any information with me or any other real estate agent. And please don't assume that we work for you unless you've actually what?
Hired us.
Hired us. And then they give you the whopper. The why. Why should they not share any information with us at this point in time?
Because they can share it with others.
Because we're going to use it against you, baby doll. We're going to use it against you. Stop talking. Jen, you had your hand up.
Now, I understand every firm does have, their own set of rules, but for the agents, is this something that they're going to typically keep in a briefcase in their car in case on a whim they run into somebody, or is there situations where sometimes the firm will tell the agent, or the head broker will tell the agent, you need to come here, bring them in here, get this done here, the disclosure needs to be, okay.
No, you need to have this on your person at all times if you're a licensee, because here's the truth. The rule does not say when it's convenient. It says no later than first substantial contact. The reality is you're going to have first substantial contact in some odd places sometimes.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, here's the example I always give in class. It was when I was teaching class one day. We took a lunch break. I went to the drive-thru at Burger King. We're not going to talk about my life choices. I realize that's a poor one. But I went to the drive-thru at Burger King, and it was a live class, an in-person class, and I had the microphone clipped to my lapel because I wear a microphone when I'm teaching live. I did not think about having the microphone still on. I routinely would just walk out and, mute it and walk out and wear it and then come back in and it'd be fine. Well, the lady at the drive-thru noticed that I had a microphone clipped to my shirt. She looked at me and she said, "What are you, the weatherman?" Because she's just being nice. And I looked down and I saw the microphone. I said, "No, not the weatherman, just teaching a class." And she said, "Oh, well, what do you teach?" I said, "Well, I teach real estate classes. I own a real estate school." And she said, "Oh, honey, I need to talk to you. Me and my husband, we've been looking for a house, but he got terrible credit. It has been the worst thing in the world trying to get us fine."
Lady, can I just get my Whopper?
Have we had first substantial contact right there in the drive-thru?
Yes.
Absolutely, because now I know she's potentially a what?
Customer.
Buyer.
A buyer customer, right? And do I know personal, confidential, juicy information about her as a buyer that could be used against her in a transaction?
Yes.
Yeah, she got a deadbeat husband with bad credit. That's first substantial contact. And Danielle, exactly. I just need my Whopper, please.
Right.
I mean, come on now. So to your question, Jen, we really need to have this available in paper format, or we can have electronic format. I love, things like DocuSign, because I can fire an email at somebody at a heartbeat, to do this. Shanar?
So Travis, this document has to be signed. It's mandatory, yes?
No, we're going to talk about that.
Okay.
It is mandatory for us to ask them to sign it. Okay.
Okay. But he doesn't have to sign it. Or she doesn't have
That is correct. We have not talked about that yet, but that is correct. Natalie?
I had the same question. If we're going to talk about it, then never mind.
They do not have to sign it. I mean, think about the reality of that. What are we going to do? Tackle them? We just met this person.
But my question, Travis, if they don't have to sign it, how can we as brokers prove that we at least gave?
We're going to talk about that. What would be the most likely? Right on there. They would not sign it.
Okay.
That's all you can do. That's all you can do. Erica?
Quick follow-up for this. What if you already know what would be considered first substantial contact information about someone who requests that you be their realtor? So you already know this type of information before.
Have you presented the form?
No, because
then you're late.
No. You don't know that they want you to be their realtor.
It doesn't matter. That's the disconnect you got in your brain, Erica. I don't know that the lady in the drive-thru wants me to be her agent. I know that she's a potential buyer, and she just shared juicy information. That's enough. And that minute, I have to give the form to her. I don't just give this form to people that I think are trying to hire me. I give this form to every buyer and every seller who shares personal confidential information about themselves with me.
So even if you know the person, I hear that part and I got that. But let's say the lady that was at the drive-thru, let's say she lived down the street and you saw like an eviction notice or something.
Okay.
So
now, just seeing the eviction notice is not enough. But as soon as she comes up to you and says, "What? I'm thinking about what?
Okay.
I'm thinking about buying a house." Now you got a combination of, she's a potential customer and personal confidential information. You better give her the what?
Form.
You better give her the form. Does that make sense now?
Yes.
Right? The minute that you know that they're interested in a transaction and you've got the information, you better give them the form. Okay?
Whether it's best friend or not, right?
Whether it's your best friend or not, even it's your mama.
You know she's interested.
If you know your mama, for example, just came into some money. She just won the lottery. And you're the only one that knows it. It ain't public knowledge. And she mentions to you, and you got a real estate license, she mentions to you, "Well, I think I may need to get myself a new house." Right there, boom. She's a customer at that moment, is she not?
Yes.
Right? And you have personal confidential information about the transaction. She got cash. You better give her the form. According to the rule. Right? According to the rule. Okay? And Angie said, would it be wise to give it even if you think there could be, that they're going to reveal personal information? In the real world, absolutely. Would you try to anticipate it and go ahead and get it out of the way in the real world? What do y'all think?
Yes.
But as Seth pointed out, the way it's going to be tested is very much strictly the moment of first substantial contact. On the test, they're looking for that magic moment of first substantial contact. This should look really familiar all of a sudden, folks. Doesn't this look a lot like a menu?
Yes.
And that's exactly what this is. All those different types of agency that we just talked about, now you have to explain them to who?
That customer.
That customer that's standing in front of you. But here's a hint. You only need to explain to them things that would potentially apply to them. If your office does not practice designated dual agency, do you need to explain designated dual agency to them, or can you skip it? You can skip it. And here's the reason you can skip it. I want to show you something up there. It says, check all relationship types below that may apply to this seller. Well, if your office doesn't practice designated dual agency, there's no reason for you to explain to them something that's not going to happen with you. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
But if your office practices it, do you need to explain it?
Yes.
Yes. Now, notice, I'm going to erase that for a second. Notice over here that there are lines for initials, or I mean, not for initials, sorry, for check marks. All you're doing as an agent is checking the ones that your office offers. If your office is going to offer this person to be their seller's agent, what are you going to do on that line?
Check it.
Check it and explain to them what it means to be their seller's agent. And this gives them a very short explanation. It says the agent who gave you this form and their firm must enter into a written listing agreement with you before they market your property for sale. If you sign the listing agreement, the listing firm and its agents would then represent you. Isn't that a very short and sweet explanation of hiring a listing firm? Right? I said the buyer would either be represented by an agent affiliated with a different real estate firm or be unrepresented. What kind of agency did we just explain to them? What kind of agency we just explained to them, folks? You better be able to pick that up from that description.
Single agency?
That's single agency right there. That's single agency. How do we know it's single agency? The buyer is either what?
Hire one person.
Represented by another firm or
not at all.
not represented at all. So we just explained to them two different types of agency that we could offer them. Single agency or co-brokerage.
Co-brokerage.
Isn't that what those represent? Right? Look at the next one. Dual agency. Well, we know what that is. If our firm offers dual agency, do we have to check this line and explain it to this person?
Yes.
Here's the thing. Whether they're going to approve it or not doesn't matter. They haven't even hired us yet. We're way before getting their permission for dual agency. This is not getting their permission. This is simply telling them, if you hire us, this is going to be something we have to talk about. We're not asking for their permission for dual agency. We're saying our firm offers dual agency. If we check this box, we're not asking for their permission for designated dual agency. We're saying what?
Offers practice.
We offer it.
We offer it. Does that make sense for everybody? So we're checking the lines that apply to that particular seller. At the bottom of the form, there is a signature block. Here's the thing about the signature block, though, and a couple of you have already asked. It is not required that this customer sign this form. If you think about it, there's really no way that we could require them to sign it. What if they look at us and say, I don't care, I don't want to hire you anyway, I don't like you? Are they going to be very likely to sign something at that point in time?
No.
No, they just want you out of their face. The Real Estate Commission realizes that. Morgan, did you have a question?
Yes, I do. I think you're gonna hit on it, but I'm not. I can't remember, so I'm sorry in advance. But
no, you're fine.
If they don't agree to sign to this, so any information they give us, then we could still very much use that against them. Then, since they didn't. Here's
the thing, Morgan. Whether they sign this or not, we can still very much use that information against them, because remember, this is not hiring us.
Right.
Even
okay.
if
So they're still a customer.
They're still a customer, whether they sign. I love that you asked that question. If they don't sign this, what are they still going to be?
Customer.
If they do sign this, what are they still going to be?
A customer.
Customer. If they decide they want to hire us, there's going to be another form called a contract, like a listing agreement or a buyer agency agreement, and they have to sign that form to actually hire us. Right? Okay. They're signing here saying, I understand, I haven't hired you yet. Does that help, Morgan?
Yes, they did.
Okay. Now, some of them are going to sign and some of them are not going to sign. If they sign, great. That's proof you did your job. In a perfect world, they would all sign. How many of you think it's not going to be a perfect world? And a lot of them are not going to sign. How many of them think, remember, this is somebody you just met in the line at the grocery store. This is somebody you just met online. This is somebody who just messaged you on Facebook. And then you presented them with this form. You've told them, hey, listen, I'm not your agent, so you probably shouldn't give me all this personal information. And they say, well, you know what? I already have an agent. Anyway. Okay, great. Are you still supposed to ask them to sign the form even if they already have an agent?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, because you need proof that you presented the form to them. Does that make sense for everybody? What if they say to you, I already have an agent? You say, okay, well, can I get you to sign here just acknowledging that I presented you the form? A lot of people are going to shut down and do what?
Say no.
I'm not going to sign. And that is perfectly fine. And here's what you're going to do with it. Don't bend yourself in pretzels. It is a simple answer.
Refuse to
sign.
You can write refused, you can write didn't, you can write declined to sign, whatever language you write up there. Here's what I would simply do. I would put whatever information I had about them. If I know their name, I would put Sam Seller. And I would date it. And I would sign it myself. And file it away. Put my license number on there. My firm name.
And just before it comes up, we will talk about how long you have to keep it.
We will talk about the having to keep it. But here's the thing. If they don't sign it, folks, they don't sign it. Everybody with me on that? Now, the Real Estate Commission says you should do this no later than first substantial contact. Are there going to be weird and wonky situations where it's just not realistic? If somebody sends you a message and you're not even reading your messages at that point in time, is it going to be hard to expect you to always do this at no later than first substantial contact?
Yes.
Yes. Here's what the Real Estate Commission says. Under no circumstances should it ever be more than 3 days past the first substantial contact. It should be done when?
At first substantial contact.
At first substantial contact. But under no circumstances should it ever be later than 3 days. If you go in, and now here's the thing. If they look at your files and you're consistently going in that 3-day grace period, they're going to nail you. That should be a once in a million. I couldn't track them down. Here's the thing. Even if you're having a phone conversation with somebody, you have first substantial contact. Can't you immediately, as soon as you hang up the phone, send them a text message or an email with this form attached to it?
Yes.
Absolutely. And put in the email, hey, thank you for the conversation. It's nice talking to you. Just a quick reminder, I don't represent you yet, and I've attached a form here that talks about the things that we talked about on the phone. Here's the thing, and this is why I love when you really start to think like a licensee. Is it necessary that I get their signature at all?
No.
All I need is proof that I did what?
Give it to her.
You did
I presented it to them.
Representative.
Folks, if I email it to them, don't I already have proof that I presented it to them?
Yep.
Yes.
I don't give a shit whether they sign it or not. I've got all the proof I need. Because if the Real Estate Commission comes and says, did you present the work on a real estate agent? Yes, I did. Here's the email. Here's the text message. Here's when I sent it to them. Done. And they're going to say, thank you. Have a great day. Because they don't care if they sign it either. The only time I ever even pay attention to the signature or not, when I'm doing it in person. Because when I'm doing it in person, I don't really have proof that I presented it to them. Does that make sense for everybody now?
Yes.
Janet, you had your hand up.
Maybe this isn't pertinent, or maybe you said it, but if you know that they already have someone, like, what would you say? I mean, you would just say you need to do this anyway, but like, what if you know they already have someone? How would you?
If I know they already have someone, here's what I would do. If I know they already have an agent, if they say to me, listen, I'm an agent, but I'm not your agent, right? When we get to this page, I would say, well, here's the thing. You already got an agent, so none of this applies to you. I'd put a big old X across all of it. And then I would have them sign at the bottom if they would. Because that's proof that I told them what? I'm not your what?
Not your agent.
I'm not your agent. That's it.
Did you explain it any differently if you already knew they had someone, or no?
As soon as well, here's the thing. I'm not going to know there's not going to be any, I already knew they had someone. That's probably what prompted me to give it to them. Isn't that in and of itself first substantial contact? because I'm talking to them, right? We're having a conversation. And all of a sudden they lay on me, yeah, we're thinking about buying a house, but we already have an agent. That's first substantial contact, is it not?
Yes.
What do y'all think?
It is.
It is.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. I'm just going to give them the form and say, good, that's awesome. Here's what you need to know. I'm not your agent, so don't tell me anything personal, confidential. And you're done. That's the whole presentation.
Yep. Okay.
That's the whole presentation right there. You only go through explaining the forms of agency if you're going to offer them those forms of agency. Let me tell you a little secret. Sometimes the person you're talking to is clearly an asshole and you don't want to work for him. Do you still have to present the form to them?
Yes, you
Yes.
Yes. Do you have to explain these agency choices to them if you know there's no way in Hades you would work for this person?
Nope.
No. Because you're only presenting to them what's possible. If I know there is no way I would work for this person, I'm not going to explain a thing on here. I'm going to say to them, I'm not your what?
Agent.
I'm not your
Please
agent.
sign here. You're just acknowledging that I'm not your agent. You only say what needs to be said. You only explain what needs to be explained. Everybody okay with that?
Yep.
Okay. I mean, it's really just meant to be a warning. Don't get so hung up. What did I say was not important? The form. What is important?
The disclosure?
The disclosure, the conversation, the explaining to them who you are and why you're there in front of them. Here's the thing. If you're at an open house, you're the seller's agent, you're holding an open house. How many times that day are you going to probably have first substantial contact as buyers come in there?
A lot.
A lot. Because every single one of them is going to tell you something about themselves. Right? And are a lot of them already going to have buyer's agents even though their agent is not there with them?
Probably.
Yeah. And you may know that, you may not. Let's say a buyer comes in and you say, welcome to the open house. Let me know if you have any questions. Well, I'm just wondering how many square feet it is because we have 4 kids and so we need at least 2,500 square feet. Have they given you first substantial contact right there, folks?
Yes.
Yes.
So here's what I need to say to them. Listen, I'm here to answer any of your questions. But you need to understand I'm not your agent. They might say, oh, well, good. We already have an agent. I'm done. Sign here. There's no reason. What else am I going to talk to about the form with this person? They can't hire me because they've already what?
Hired another.
They already hired another firm. All I need is proof that I told them what? The most important thing. I'm not your what?
Not their agent.
I'm not your agent. The other stuff is only if you want to continue the relationship. How do we feel about that statement?
Good.
Okay, good. Now, the buyer version is exactly the same as the seller version. There's no need to talk about the buyer version separately. You just give them the version that applies to them, and that's it. It's the same rules apply. It's got a signature box, but the buyer doesn't have to sign it. They can if they want to. Again, exact same rules apply. So just kind of recap the Working with Real Estate Agents brochure. It is not a contract. They are not creating an agreement. You're simply telling them the big warning. Hey, I'm not your agent. So whatever information you shared with me that prompted this conversation, stop. Because I'm not your agent. And I might use that information against you. Now, if you want to talk further about me being your agent, we can certainly do that. And I'll explain to you the choices you would have. But they don't have to sign it. The first substantial contact rule is the most important thing about disclosing agency. Remember how in designated dual agency I told you that your basic answer for can this be in the bubble and can this be in the bubble should always be what?
Yes.
Yes. Because there's 50 examples of yes and only one example of what?
No.
No. What do you think they try to trick you into on the test? Constantly making you think it's the no answer. Here's the thing. If you want to play it safe, always say that every combination is okay in designated dual agency, right? Because there's 50 that are possible and only one that's what?
Not.
It's not. Same thing is true here. There's a narrow exception to the first substantial contact rule. But some of you are damn hard-headed. You think it's more important to learn the narrow exception than it is the rule. What's more important to learn? What's going to be the most likely answer? The rule. When's the rule for the timing of this thing? What does the rule say you should do the timing of this thing?
Before they give you any personal information.
Before they give you any personal information. So, watch this. Don't think. You're not allowed to think. If you're a buyer's agent and you're talking to a potential buyer about representing, when should you go over the working with real estate agents brochure?
For substantial.
First substantial contact, when they give you personal confidential information. If you're walking around knocking on doors talking to sellers about potentially selling their house, when should you give them the working with real estate agents brochure?
Immediately.
See, you just did it, Danielle.
I try not to think, Travis.
That's what, but here's the thing. If you don't think, you always answer with the what?
Just the rule.
The rule. The rule. And what's the rule?
First substantial
Contact. So if you're walking around knocking on doors talking to people about selling their house, when do you give them the working with real estate agents brochure?
When they do the first substantial.
First substantial contact. If you are a seller's agent and you're holding an open house and buyers come to the open house, when do you give them the working with real estate agents brochure?
First substantial
contact. If you're sitting there and somebody emails you and they start talking about real estate, when do you give them the brochure?
First substantial contact.
See, that's what I mean when I say don't think, right? Because the automatic answer should always be when for disclosing agency.
First substantial.
First substantial contact. Don't worry about the exception until you get the rule nailed down.
Yeah, start with the rule.
Okay. Now, I'm going to mention the exception, but which one are you going to focus on and make sure you get nailed down first?
The rule.
Rule. And the rule. So when in doubt, what are you going to answer on a test? When do we give the working with real estate agents brochure?
First substantial.
First substantial contact. Everybody good with that?
Okay.
The only exception to that is, and it is only one situation, if you have been hired by a buyer, you are already a buyer's agent. But the conversation you are having is with either the seller or the seller's agent. I'm going to say that again. You've already been hired by who? Who do you represent?
The buyer.
And you're talking to who?
Seller.
Seller or seller's agent. Why are you most likely talking to a seller or a seller's agent if you're working for a buyer anyway?
Because they're interested in the property.
Because they're interested in the property, and you better lead with that. You better that's the one time you don't wait for first substantial contact. What do you think you identify yourself as immediately when they pick up the phone or you send them an email?
I'm the
buyer's agent.
I represent the buyer, and that's why I'm calling you. That's the one time you don't wait for first substantial contact. But in every other situation, you don't have to tell somebody who you are and who you represent until when?
First substantial
Contact. Does everybody see the difference there? So the rule is always going to be first substantial contact, first substantial contact, first substantial contact, first substantial contact. Focus on the rule. Once you get the rule nailed down, then you have my permission to pay attention to the one exception, which is you've already been hired by who? Buyer. But you're reaching out to who?
The seller or seller agent.
Or their agent saying, hey, I have a buyer client who's interested in your property. You should do that right away. Because it's not fair to them otherwise. They think you might be calling for other reasons. They think you might be calling to try to represent them as a seller. They think you may be, they don't know why you're calling, So you want to make that clear right away. That's the one exception. Other than that, follow the rule. Folks, that's it for disclosing agency. That's it for Unit 3.4. That's it. Those are some heavy topics. Okay?